So if we both watched Aquaman 2 this week, which I begged you to watch almost. As soon as I saw it dropped, I watched with my kids Aquaman 2 on whatever night it came out. Was it Thursday night? Something like that,
Wednesday or
Tuesday night.
Thursday. Yeah, it was
Um
definitely this week.
yeah, I had no idea it was dropping, and it dropped on HBO, and I gotta say, um it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. It's a big budget film, and by the time I finished, I think I even said it in our chat, I was like, this is worse than Madam Web. Like, I actually thought Madam Web, for as bad as it was better than Aquaman 2. Um and I think it's because Aquaman 2 is just too fucking much. It's just too much. Where Madam Web lacked in um almost every bit of energy and all that, at least like the through line went from point A to point B, and got there. And Aquaman 2 was just weird. Like, in a lot of ways, it's similar to Madam Web. Like, I didn't care about the villain in this one. I actually cared about the villain more in the first one. Like, I the whole extra bad guy that was making the first bad guy do the bad guy things was so weird. Like, he really wasn't a threat. Like, he was there, and he had this weird magical underworld that was called, oh, do you remember the name of it?
I do not.
It was called
But
Necru,
Necris,
Necru. Yeah,
Necris.
Necrus. There you go. And which just means death. I was like, so it was just always named Death, and you're surprised that it turned into, you know, it turned into hell. And like, the character designs were weird. Like, it's already a weird comic to adapt, anyways. Like, they almost stayed too true to the whole Aquaman design.
Mhm.
All right, like, he's just so shiny and golden and all that. Like, I was like, you need to mellow that out a little bit. Like, do a Captain America Winter Soldier. Let's dial this costume back,
Right.
and and then I have the same problem with Jason Momoa in this one as I do with him in Final Fantasy, or sorry, not Final Fantasy, in Fast and Furious X,
Too
where
goofy.
what's that?
Too goofy. Like what?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, if you let him loose, his natural energy is like chaotic and over the top, which I love. Like, I think he would be like the raddest dude to hang out with, right? Like, Jason
Right.
Momoa seems like dope as shit. But his best work for me has always been something like Game of Thrones or
Oh
C,
yeah.
or something like that, where they rein him in and just let him be, a little more, moody and grumpy. And I almost would rather see um a moodier Aquaman than what we got.
Yeah. I do have a soft spot for, kind of losing situations in a bit. And I likened watching Aquaman to like watching a team finish out a game when they're like 30 points behind and have no chance of winning, but they're just gonna keep playing until the very end. That's how I saw this movie. And it's funny because I'm usually the kind of person like I don't look at my phone or whatever, like when I'm watching a movie. If I do look at my phone, I'm pausing the movie because I literally am very like one track. Dude, I absolutely did other things as I watched this movie. I only stopped what I was doing when there was a lot of action happening just for the eye candy. I mean, it was literally like, I'm only watching this just to like finish out the DCEU, be able to speak intelligently to it for the podcast. And a bit of morbid curiosity, like how does the DCEU end? And it ends with a cockroach in a sandwich. Like that's how the DCEU ended. Like I actually went and like, you know, forwarded and back like during the credits to see if there's an end credit scene and
Yeah, just
that's
one
it.
more. Yeah, I do the same thing. And I was like, nope, that's okay.
That's it. Like it started off with Man of Steel, which was an amazing for me, an amazing start,
Yeah.
promising start, and ends with that. But I do actually want to say, and I also loved that Aquaman called Orm Loki at one point. Like that, I actually took a picture of that. I don't know if you caught that or not.
I didn't catch that. There was for me there was too many tongue-in-cheek Marvel references.
That was the only one I caught, but he called him Loki, and I'm like, that's exactly it. And this
Oh,
is the Dark World.
the one that infuriated me was the last one
Talk
when
to
he
me.
finishes the press conference and he comes
Oh,
back and
and
he
I
grabs the
am
mic.
Aquaman. Yeah.
And a friend. I'm the king of Atlantis. I am Aquaman.
Dude, that was lame. Okay,
Oh,
like
I
yeah,
was like,
I was
dude, no. I was like, how, like that really like of all the other things like that bothered me the most. I was like, no, dude, because number one, they call him Aquaman all the time in this movie, and I'm like,
never. Yeah,
why would you call him that? He's a king for one. He's the king of Atlantis, and he's Arthur Curry. Pick one of those two, but nobody calls him fucking Aquaman. Like, why would you call him Aquaman? Like his like I think his brother calls him Aquaman at one point.
yes, he does.
I'm like, why? You don't even like him. Come up with a better insult than Aquaman. You're an Aquaman. You live under the water too, dickhead. Like you're the same thing. Like it's not. Yeah.
But but I actually I did like Patrick Wilson. I actually
So did
think
I.
he
I
was
thought
my
he was the best
favorite
part of the
part of
movie.
the movie.
Yeah.
Yes, 1,000%. He was great. And I also got to give him props. I mean, unless that was CGI, like he got pretty buff for this role. And like I so to go from that to like, when I think of him as like, from the Conjuring series, like
Hmm.
completely different characters, right?
Yeah, for
I
sure.
buy him as like the younger angry Orm. It was a trip seeing Randall Park. I mean, I think his character reminded me of the comic relief that you see in the Godzilla versus Kong universe. Like that's how
Sort of,
I see
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
But he was cool. Dolph Lundgren, something about his vocal delivery was
Ye-
very annoying.
Oh, it was terrible. Yeah. Yeah. Even my kids were like, what accent is he trying to do? And I was like, he actually has an accent. Like Dolph Lundgren is that weird guy where um he is an action star and all that shit, but he's fucking brilliant, dude. He has like 2 degrees. He's got like a science degree. It might actually be physics and chemistry or some shit like that. Like he's smart. Like he's incredibly smart. He went to school. He is like legit a scientist, but he's also an actor, right?
I
And you don't know that. Like you look at him and you see him act, and you're like, he's a big,
yeah,
he's the dude from fucking Rocky. Like he's a big, you know.
I
For me, I
yeah,
always remember him as the guy from Universal Soldier, right? Like
that's right.
he's, he's a big beefcakey muscle guy with a thick, Eastern European accent, right? Like that's who he is. And his accent was so weird in this movie. Like everything about his vocal and every time he showed up, oh, and that's the other thing too. Like, God damn it, why did they bother with the hair? Like
Oh,
they
I was
animate
thinking about
so
you.
much
That didn't
hair.
bug me so much. It didn't
Oh,
bug me
dude,
so
looks
much,
so
but for
bad.
you, yeah. I
Looks
mean,
so bad.
the whole. Well, I'm not even gonna go into special effects because that whole thing is over the top, and I feel like that was just James Wan's thing. But going
Yeah.
back to Lundgren really quick, just total random trivia. Do you know who Grace Jones is?
Yes.
Okay, do you know they actually dated? Like seriously?
That would have been a long time ago, yeah.
80s, yeah, dude. But like
Okay,
it was
okay.
weird. Like Grace Jones and Dolph Lundgren were a thing. Like, okay, that was pretty
Talk about a
cool.
power couple, huh?
Yeah, yeah. Conan and well, she was in Conan and James Bond.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, I digress. Now, so yeah, I just felt like the chemistry, honestly, I think between Jason and Patrick as Thor and Orm, I liked. Like the movie for me was painful up until Orm shows up all like chained, and then when the water washes over him and he comes out, I'm like, yeah, and then like they're running through the jungle and stuff, and you're building a bridge. Yeah, some of that was a little silly, but
Yeah, it
I
was
still
corny, but yeah.
but I was still feeling it. And even when Orm was like, when Dolph Lundgren's like, save me, and Orm just kind of smiles at him and goes away. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh shit, that actually got me. I thought Orm was going to go bad, but
Yeah, like I didn't think he was gonna go bad, but I just felt like for a second, like, yeah, he could let this guy go. Like this guy was a dick. Like he in his mind for a minute, like he's like,
he thought
cool.
about it.
He's like, I got better shit to do, and you've been a dick to me, so I'm out. And then like he comes back and
No, it
it,
was cool,
it,
cool.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, they look at each other and they have a conversation with no words. And I just felt like that was cool. Like, you know,
Yeah.
we're good now, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, honestly, like you know what? I think, and I could be totally wrong here, but I think I like this one better than the first one, honestly. You know, yeah,
Well, like the first one, God, the first one, if they just hadn't done uh that huge CGI battle at the end, like that was just so overwhelmingly bad that was hard. And then I don't know how they didn't watch the first one and think they needed to change Hera's wig. Like how they came back with the exact same hair.
the
I was
costume
like,
there.
I was
When
like, it was terrible.
it wasn't like that in any of what's his name's movies, Snyder. It was more of a natural red than
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um, but you know, it's funny because like they barely gave Amber Heard any lines, which is hilarious because I felt like, you know, we just have to have her in here, but like whatever. Like honestly, I just think they
But
did
she
a good
saved this. She saves the day like
point.
3 times. Like she's more powerful than anybody in the movie. Like she just jumps out of the water and she's like, "Watch this! I have powerful water cannons. I fucking destroyed you." She's like, "Check this out! I got shot by the manta direct in the chest, and I'm okay." Like
Yeah.
she's like, you know, put me in a bed with a band-aid for a couple of minutes, I'll be fine. Like she was like honestly like the most powerful character in the movie, and they just didn't acknowledge it. Like every now and then she would pop up and do something like insane and save the day, and then go on. Like if it wasn't for her, if you watch the movie, it wasn't for her, they would have lost.
Oh yeah, 100%. You know, she was the first one to get like hurt though, like
Hmm.
seriously. She almost got killed. But you're right. But I just feel like this movie is a great example of taking a turd and like polishing it. Like I think that's what we got, right? And they polished it the best way they could to like put it out there. And the best part about it is it actually did make money. The budget was
Yes.
200 to 250 million to 415 million. It grossed 434 million. It needed to make like a 300 something to make break even. So while the first one I think made like double that,
Oh, the
like
first one I think was a
a
billion, wasn't
bill,
it? Or was
yeah,
it
I think it was
close,
a
right?
billion. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, it's still considering the way you know Warner Brothers has been doing lately with superhero movies. This was a surprise hit, especially considering they put all their eggs in what's it called, Flash.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
I think
I think Momoa carries a lot of weight. Like I think he's got enough fans that people go to see what he's going to do. And part of it too is like it's the end of the thing, right? It's like this is
yeah,
the end. We know this is the end
yes,
more so than the Flash, and um, you know, and the first one was a hit.
yeah.
So you like basically even if half of the people go see it that saw the first one, you're making $500 million. Like you're still doing okay. So in that regard too, I think that helps.
So yeah, I think honestly this is gonna be a short one. So RIP DCEU. You know, I think you hated it more than I did. I won't watch it again. But I think it could have been worse in my opinion. I just think that Patrick Wilson and AC were okay as you know, as a Thor and
Yeah, yeah. I think if they had cut out about half of the cheese between the two of them, like they really would have been good together. And like you said, I think he was great. Like he was the best part of the movie by far.
by far.
Um,
Oh, dude, when he ate the cockroach in the jungle, though, believe it or not, that woke me up. I was getting sleepy, and then that part just grossed me out so hard. I woke up and I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch the rest of this movie because I didn't think that was gonna happen. And I felt like, you know, Aquaman was like messing with him, but I
yeah,
also, but I thought he was gonna like spit it out, but he was actually like, you know. And then when he said it's like you know the shrimp of the land or land shrimp or whatever, like I was like, that's why I kind of stopped eating shrimp around 2020. Like and I'm not really that big of a seafood like as in crustacean guys anymore because I really look at lobster and crab. They're sea bugs. I can't do it, and I feel
yeah, but
bad
they're
for people
tasty as
that
sea bugs. I eat them. I eat the shit out of
okay,
them.
that's fine. So you're fine. You're not being, but I just I mean I used to like them, but now I'm just I can't. But anyways, I digress again. but yuck, like that cockroach. And like, was it animatronic? It had to be because it was moving.
Or CGI or something. It's one of the two.
Yeah.
Like you know, um, or it was real. I don't know. It was big though. Like I think it was exaggeratedly big because things in that little area were
Yes,
exaggeratedly big.
with the
Um,
oligarch, whatever it's called,
yeah,
oligarch and cool.
yeah, yeah. And to be fair, like I actually didn't like Randall Park's part either. It was like a half-ass version of other things that he'd already done.
Yeah.
It didn't feel original. And it wasn't that like the character wasn't original. It didn't feel original for him. Like I look at that and I like Randall Park a lot, but I was like, this is just a paycheck.
I think my favorite part where he did it was when he walks in the room and then he's like, "Stop right there," whatever. Then he hits the button, and goes, "Take me with you." Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that was funny. I like that part.
He's like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Yes. And then
Yeah,
he's like, knock
that
him out. Like, no, knock him out. Like that was, and actually, one more thing. Even that fight afterwards, like Orm held his own. Like I think it was cool to see Orm again. Like actually, like he's not as strong as Aquaman. I keep wanting to say Thor. Kumar is Aquaman, but like I just like the fact that like the main or one of the main villains from the first film is actually, actually like holding his own and kicking ass and taking names.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
Aquaman.
He really was the best part. The other thing that bothered me too is like there was a few scenes where there was underwater chases and like they're in vehicles, and then to catch the other bad guy, they leave the vehicle and swim faster than the vehicle was going. I'm like, why do you even have vehicles? If you can go faster than your vehicle, why do you have a vehicle?
Yeah.
Like I always joke when people are like, I'm gonna go running, I'm gonna go for a run today. And I'm like, why would you do that? You have a car. I was like, you don't have to run anywhere ever. You never have to run. Like, why would you do that? And and so like this is the opposite. Like if you are that fast, right? And if you can catch up to anything outside of your vehicle, why would you be in your vehicle? Like it just protection, maybe. I mean, that's how what's her face got shot in the chest, but um it was weird. And then they're super agile and strong and everything underwater. And I'm like, vehicles don't make sense here in this world unless they're faster than you. And that's the other thing too, is like they don't that's the problem with in a lot of cases the DC universe. Like their superheroes are so powerful
They're gods.
that they're hard to slow down. Like Superman and the Flash have had foot races, right? Like they're both like crazy fast. But then somehow in so many movies and so many scenes they have to catch up to something or they can't do anything. And I'm like, dude, if you stick to their power set, they're from here to there like that, like instantly. Like it's so it doesn't make sense. In the comic books, there's literally a time when Superman moves so fast that he goes back and forth between himself and Clark Kent in a room so that everybody can see Superman and Clark Kent, and he bounces back and forth between the two so fast that people see him in two places at once because their mind can't put together the space between, right? So, like, it's tricky. Either you have to start them less powered and make them, bring them down to earth, or do you just have to accept that this is their power set, right? And they don't. DC struggles with that because their characters really are gods. Like Marvel has the advantage that the only real god they had was Thor and Loki, right? Everything from Thor is gods, but most of them are people, and that's why I think one of the reasons that for the beginning of Marvel was so popular and so good because you had to watch these human struggles in there, right? Um, and DC is always going to struggle with that, so it'll be interesting to see what James Gunn does. I saw the um the little TikTok I shared with you guys from Rachel Brosnahan with her and David Cornsweet and Nicholas Holt. So she's in the middle. She's doing her thing, talking about how it's the first day of filming, and then from the side, David Cornsweet comes in, and then Nicholas Holt comes in. He's got his head shaved and everything for Lex Luthor. But it's good to see that this thing is starting to move forward because they started filming Wednesday, something like that, which was Superman's birthday. Like,
The 29th, yes.
yeah. So
Jewish
it's,
man.
yeah, it's technically Superman's birthday, and they started filming that day. So the movie is officially underway. He leaked his look at the
Logo.
logo,
Yeah.
which looks solid. It looks good.
Mhm.
So I'm excited for that. I saw something too that basically everything that James Gunn has announced for the DCU going forward at this point will go into production this year or at the latest the beginning of next year. So Woman of Tomorrow, this Superwoman movie or Supergirl movie, he's got a couple of either TV or animated series that are going to go. I mean, part of it. Peacemaker 2 should go into production this year. Waller's going to go into production this year. Um, there's Creature Commandos. I'm trying to remember if there's one more superhero. I don't think there is, but so they're going to get off and rolling pretty fast here. So I think we're probably, if they take their time and do it right, I think they've already announced Superman, right? Superman's July of next year or June of
Yeah,
next year.
I want to say July 2025, and now it's just
Yeah.
called, as you know, Superman. There's no more
Yep.
like,
No
so
legacy. Yeah. Which I'm okay with. I I really want to see a good, like, he doesn't have to look like Christopher Reeve or necessarily act like Christopher Reeve, although Christopher Reeve was pretty fucking perfect as Superman. Um, but I want that feel again. I want that like lightness that had. I do love Man of Steel. Like, I came out of the theater loving that movie. I had a problem with the end of it. There's a million ways that Superman would have dealt with that conflict in other worlds, and instead he just kills somebody, um, which is not his thing, right? Like, it is what it is. Um, but I let that go. Like, for the rest of the movie, I really like the rest of that movie. A lot of people have pointed out, and it's the same thing like I was just talking about, like, why did Kevin Costner have to die in that movie? Like, he's so fast that he should have been able to protect him and nobody would have noticed that it was him, especially because they were all looking at the friggin' tornado, right? They weren't going to notice if he left and came back. So, but whatever. Um, but yeah, Man of Steel is solid. So, but I want a lighter Superman. Like, I want the guy that Christopher Reeve was, that the guy on Superman and Lois is. I think Superman and Lois is a great Superman, although he's an adult Superman. This is a younger. I mean, he's still an adult, but he's definitely a younger Superman. Um, Speaking of Superman, I was telling my son today that, because he's a big Star Wars fan, and there's been a post going around lately, and I've seen it before, but when Christopher Reeve was cast as Superman back in, a long time ago, he started
nice.
working out. Yeah, and his workout buddy was David Prowse, who's Darth Vader. So
Mhm.
Superman and Darth Vader were gym buddies, which is hilarious. So I told my son that, and then I remembered there's a scene in, I can't remember if it's Superman or Superman 2, but where Clark decides that he wants to tell Lois that he's Superman. And it's
Pretty
just,
sure it's two, but keep
I think
going.
so too.
Yeah.
And it's a really subtle scene, but you
Oh
see,
yes, well yes, where
when,
they're in Niagara Falls in the hotel room.
yeah, yeah. And
Yes,
he takes off the glasses and he unhunches himself and he just gets like
yes,
so much bigger. And you're like,
yes.
Lois, for goodness sake, didn't you hear me knocking? Lois, we did have a date tonight, remember?
Oh.
Lois?
Huh?
You haven't been,
Oh, no, no.
well, I should certainly hope not. Well, let's, push off, shall we?
I better get a coat. It might be kind of
okay.
cold up. No, I mean, I need a purse. I have to fix my hair and some blush on.
Lois, there's something I have to tell you. I'm really... I was, at first, really nervous about tonight. But then I decided, well, darn it, I was going to show you the time of your life.
like, there's no special effects, there's no nothing crazy, but there's a physical difference between Clark Kent and Superman. Like,
1000%.
not just the glasses, like, it's not just that. And I've always thought that was absolutely brilliant. Like
Mhm.
even Cavill doesn't have that. Like, and it would have been really impressive to see him do that because that dude's built like a brick shit house. Like the scene when in Man of Steel when Cavill comes out of the water after saving the like
Yes.
even I was like, oh, okay, this guy's a little dreamy, right? And and he was fine. Like Clark Kent is fine and all that, but like he's such a good looking dude that like there's no
He was
nerdy
not a
goofy
nerdy Clark Kent. He was
right.
a normal Clark Kent, and I think that was also the difference. Like that Clark Kent could still, get some tail, right?
Yeah,
Whereas like the Reeve Clark Kent, it was absolutely not getting tail. Like
oh,
he
he
was
was
grown
so
out.
good at being dorky. Like,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the whole thing. That's supposed to be like Clark Kent isn't just the glasses. Clark Kent um is the nerdy in the cover story. And that's the thing too. That's what sets Clark Kent apart from Batman, right? Is that for Batman, I guess it's kind of the same once he becomes Batman, but Clark Kent is the actual false identity, right? Like he is Kal-El, he is Superman, and he needs this identity to be, whatever. Whereas, some other guys, they're really themselves, and the superhero is the alter ego. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, I think he could arguably say that Bruce Wayne is also an alter ego. The real
yeah,
guy
yeah. I
is
mean, he grew up Bruce Wayne and all that, but yeah, you can definitely lean into that. Like he is more himself as Batman. And that's another one where they've done a better job with him in the
films.
like in the Bale films and stuff, but
Yes.
he should definitely be a complete jackass. Like he should be a rich, spoiled, playboy, and then, go out and whoop the living shit out of people like that. So in the Batman with Twilight Boy,
Yeah, yeah.
Pattinson,
Mhm.
like he was so moody the whole time that like you didn't get the difference between, party going Bruce Wayne.
He hadn't
Uh,
created Bruce Wayne yet.
yeah,
That,
yeah,
I
like
think
he
that's what
didn't.
they were trying to get at, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So that'll be interesting too to see where that goes. Um, but cool, yeah. So that was the DCU and Aquaman 2, and if you like the first one, go watch the second one. I'll say that if you liked Aquaman 2 is kind of more of the same.
Yeah.
And if you're a big DCU fan, like it's the goodbye, it's the fizzle at the end. Um, and it has its moments. It has its, decent parts. Like you said, I think what's his name as Orin was great.
Wilson.
Um, yeah, is it Patrick Wilson? Is that what it is?
Patrick Wilson, yes.
All right, so real quick, before we jump into Shogun, which we will talk about in a minute, I watched Spaceman on Netflix, which is a film starring Adam Sandler, directed by I'm going to say his name wrong probably, but Jonah Rank, and he has directed like a laundry list of amazing things like Chernobyl. Um, ah, damn, I can't remember any of the ones right now, but he's directed a good number of really really solid
Johan.
movies and shows. Yeah, and this movie is weird, man. It is a slow paced, artsier film. And if you haven't seen the trailer does a pretty good job of giving you a little to go on, but not giving anything away. From the trailer, we see a dude that is stuck out in space. He's on a mission that we don't, from the trailer, you don't know what he's doing, but he's on a spaceship by himself for some reason. And he befriends this giant spider, which is on board the ship for unknown reasons. And the spider is very conversational, voiced by Paul Dano. And his wife is back at home, played by Carrie Mulligan. And it is this is a mood movie. So it's an emotional, um, you know, slow paced kind of burner movie, and the gist of it is, so what you don't see in the trailer and what you get from watching the movie, the gist of it is that somewhere just past Jupiter, this cloud is showing up, and they call it the Chopra cloud. It's this big purple cloud that you can now see from Earth, but it's out past Jupiter, and nobody knows why it's there. And so, for reasons that I don't remember that I'm explaining, they sent this dude out on a mission by himself to go look at it. Now, this isn't NASA. He is not Polish, Romanian, maybe. And he's from an Eastern European country. Anyways, and then, so they send him out. He's all by himself. I mean, and to be fair, Adam Sandler does a really good job in this movie. I think when he does dramatic work, especially lately, like he's good. Like he's actually a good actor. The accent that he puts on, I don't totally buy. Um, but it's good enough. And so, we come to find out he's deep into this mission. Uh, his wife has been sending him messages that aren't getting through because in the messages she's trying to send, she's telling him that she wants to leave him. She doesn't want to be with him anymore, mostly because he has chosen work over her. She was pregnant and he left anyways, like all this stuff. And so, the Romanian NASA, I don't know what they are basically filtering his messages. Like they're like, we can't let him see this. We can't let him be down when he's, about to discover what this thing is, when he's about to go into this cloud and figure out what it is. So he's out there on his own. Life is starting to get hard. He's depressed because he knows there's something wrong at home. Like he can feel it. The conversation that he has had hasn't been great. He left on not perfect terms, and all that. And then now, like the big issue that he's having, is that like the toilet doesn't work or the toilet's loud. So like he's on this ship, and just like things are just going poorly for him. So, you know, there's been studies done of why they wouldn't ever send somebody out by themselves. Like being completely by yourself in space would drive you fucking crazy. Phone calls back home are not enough. Like you need human interaction. This guy's out there on his own anyway. So after a while, he's having a shit time, and he wakes up and he opens the door, and there's this massive spider. Like I don't mean like massive spider. I mean like person-sized spider. It's huge, right? And number one, I have to say, like I am phobic. Like spiders freak me the fuck out. Like they are not for me. So this movie gave me the willies about 60% of the time. Like it was hard for me to watch it at points because it's just like the irrational part of my brain that is, an arachnophobe just struggled. But I did it. For one, Paul Dano is great. Like the spider character is so like calm and soothing. And so what it becomes is almost this like the spider is almost this de facto therapist for the character. The character's name is Jakob, is Adam Sandler's character, and he names the spider Hanush because the spider is like, I'm an alien. My character, my species doesn't have names, so you can just pick something to call me, basically. And there's a reason. I can't remember the story, but the name Hanush is I don't know if it's biblical or if it's just there's a some kind of importance to the name that they've picked. And so the spider is very sensitive, like you can feel his emotions and things like that. So a lot of the movie is exposition. It's talking through his past, through how he feels about his wife, other things that are going on with his wife. And at the same time, the spider Hanush is like, he's like, I'm the last of my race, so I'm here exploring the galaxy, whatever, and just trying to understand everything. And so there's a lot of exposition back and forth, and they do deal with Carey Mulligan at home too. So her mom is played by Lena Olin, who, if you're not familiar with, she was in The last thing I really remember her from was Alias. She was Sydney Bristow's mom in Alias. She's been in a lot of other stuff. I just can't think of what she was in from there. And so like she's very comforting to I think Lenka is the name of Carey Mulligan's character. And she's like, look, if you're not happy, you should leave. You know, you can do it on your own if you're going to have a baby. Like, she's trying, and Carey Mulligan's character is really sad, but at the same time you have this opposite end of the spectrum. You have Isabella Rossellini, who plays the head of Romanian NASA, and she's like, hey, we just need you to be supportive for a little longer. She's like, you can do what you need to do, but lie to him for a little while. Like, we need him to be okay for this thing, right? And so she's got to juggle all that stuff back home. And so when Adam Sandler ultimately goes into this cloud, he finds out that it's this. It reminds me of the Nexus in Star Trek Generations. It's like the beginning and the end of time all at once. Like, time doesn't really matter in there. And so he goes in there with the spider, and he starts to kind of remember and re-experience when he met his wife. And in this comes to the realization that she's more important than all this space travel, all this work that he's doing. And that he really should get back to being a husband rather than an astronaut, and that he should quit. And in this process, I guess I should have said spoilers a while ago, but in this process, these like microbes start kind of coming out of the spider, and it turns out these were the things that killed his race. And so we see him ultimately die here too. So the spider dies, Adam Sandler's all on his own, and we're kind of left with this almost dreamlike sequence where he ends up back with his wife back home, and then he gets picked up by a Korean ship that is out trying to study this cloud too. And so the end of the movie's left a little open-ended. Like, does he come back with the Koreans? Do they send him to a ship to come back? Does he make things right with his wife? There's a phone call where at the very, not a phone call, but a space video call, whatever you want to call it, back with his wife after he experiences all this, where he says something like, what's the lines, like, would you kiss me again, or something like that, which is something that they said on their first date. And the implication there is that yes, she's open to it because she understands that he's coming out of this a changed person. Like, he's going to come back and be who he should be and who she wants him to be, and they're going to be happy. But it doesn't necessarily end on that happy note. Like, it's the implication of future happiness, but he's not there yet. So like I said, it's a mood movie. It's a really weird movie. It's funny because it would have been a really interesting thing to talk about after Beau is Afraid, if we had talked about that today, because they're two very interpretive movies in a lot of ways, right? Like, there's a lot of shit going on that you kind of got to watch and just try and figure out on your own. But I don't think it's a bad movie, but it's not a like, it's not a romance film. It's about love, but it's not about love being perfect and happy, right? Like, it's one of those love is hard kind of things, and it's very slow paced. It's very dialogue based, which is funny because we just talked the other day about how Denis Villeneuve, who did Dune, was like, I don't understand movies with dialogue. Like, you shouldn't. Dialogue is killing movies and TV, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, like, really, like, some movies, I know there's the whole show don't tell, kind of thing, but sometimes, a movie is all about the dialogue. And this is definitely that movie. Like, the visuals are not over the top. Like, there's some beautiful scenes where Adam Sandler's character is in the forest in his suit, and everything's bright and beautiful and colorful, and on the space station, everything's kind of dark and grimy. Spider's brown. Like, it's not a big visual feast for most of the movie. So it really is about what this guy's going through and discovering about himself and all that. So it's interesting. Like, it's a 51% from the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, And like, even when I think about it, I'm like, was it good or was it bad? Like, is it like, for me, like the 50% is like the perfect score for this movie, because I can go both ways when I think about it. Like, was it, did I like it? Did I hate it? Was it good? Was it bad? But the performances were all really good. I think the overall message is really good there. It's just, it's slow paced. I think if you go in understanding that you're not going to get any real excitement out of the movie, I think it'll be better for you, and worth a watch for sure. But it's definitely, you know, on the fence. And if you watch the trailer and you're like, that's not for me, you don't have to bother with it. Like, it's not gonna do anything in the movie that you don't get out of the trailer. So if it doesn't catch your fancy from there, you don't really need to go any further.
That's good advice. And 63% from the audience. So that's interesting, because I feel like audiences tend to be less ponderous, right? So if this is a ponder movie and the audience actually likes it more than the critics, like that's interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I think too. I bitch about critics a lot, and sometimes I think they're harder on a film like this that's kind of middle of the road, because they're like, oh, what's it trying to say? If it doesn't say what I think it should say, then it's a bad film, right? And so, critics, are kind of up their own ass a lot of time, especially with the headier stuff. Um, so
Meanwhile, Beau is afraid. We're breadcrumbing this. We're not going to talk about it, but
yeah, we will.
actually, no. Actually, no. Well, 67% critics and then 71% audience. Man, I want to know who these people are. Who gave it 71%?
Oh, I'll tell you, yeah, like you said, breadcrumbs for when we actually talk about it. But I love Ari Aster's work. Like, he's great.
Why?
But
Let's just do it. Let's fuck it. Let's do it.
you want to just go into Bo is Afraid?
Let's just go into it, and then we'll do a part two. Because yeah, let's just do it. Because I mean, I need resolution. Like, I need to, because I mean, I hated it. Like, I hated it so much, and I feel like you agreed with me. So now we can kind of hash it out. But because Ari Aster, yeah, I'll just start. So Ari Aster, I love Ari Aster. You were 2 for 2, man. My first exposure to you was Midsummer, and I loved that movie. It was so twisted, so dark. I had no idea what I was getting into, and by the end of it, I was like, WTF, but I was also like, man, like, I've never seen a realer movie when it comes to just how cults can really F people up. And then I saw Hereditary, and I was just Hereditary. Yeah, Hereditary.
Yeah.
And I was like, also had no idea what I was getting into, but it just took me, like, I was engaged the entire time. And by the end, like, even with the piano wire and the floating, I know that, like, it's kind of lost you there, but like, for me, I was like, ah. So when I get this movie and it's this like loser, pathetic, like, man child who can't take care of himself, but I actually have come across people like that in real life.
Mhm.
And then you're like what is happening? And there's all these nut sacks everywhere in the movie. Like, I'm just like, what? And then by the end, you're just like, okay, he's just like gets judged by a council, looks oddly like a Nazi stadium. Like, the whole thing was just weird, and the overbearing mom, and yeah,
Well, and I think too,
not for me.
because I read up on it a lot afterwards, because I was like, I don't know what the fuck is happening. Um, and part of it is that everything that makes the movie bad and weird is right in the title. Like, it's all about Bo being just fucking terrified. So everything that happens to him is the worst possible thing that could happen to him in any situation. Like, and one critic was like, if you come up with 10 bad things that can happen, this is the 11th thing that can happen. Like, it's everything is the worst possible thing that can happen to this guy. And so the question is any of it even real? Like, that's the thing about the movie, is like, you watch and you're like, this stuff can't actually happen to a person this much. Like it's just so is it his brain, like his own like psychosis, you know, like you look at it and you watch in the beginning, his doctor is talking to him. He's like, you've been taking your meds, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I'm going to prescribe you this. It's a really cool new drug. And that's all he says about it. Like he just calls it a really cool new drug. Right. And so, you know, everything that happens is so bizarre. Everything that happens to this guy just doesn't make sense. Like in one of the opening scenes, he's trying to just trying to go to sleep so he can go see his mom the next day. And somebody starts sliding notes into the door, telling him to turn down the music and all this stuff. And he is obviously not playing any music, right? And those messages get more and more aggressive. Um, and then he sleeps through the alarm, and then his keys get stolen, and then somebody jumps through the roof and attacks him, and then he runs out, into the street naked and gets hit by a car, who are the people that then take him in.
Don't forget all the people go into his apartment and like totally ransack his apartment when he's trying to get money for the what's it called thing. Keep it going. But
Yeah, and so like just everything that happens to him is just so bizarre and so crazy. The two prevailing theories that I've seen is, number one, um, is it everything was actually fabricated by his mom, because his mom is rich and powerful. I guess if you watch the movie again, which I have no intention of doing, if you watch the movie again, like the logos for her company are plastered around the place that he lives. So like how much of this was like Truman Showish, where she set this up and set all these people up um to mess with him, and then the way that he was raised, like she told him if he ever ejaculates, he will die. And his dad died the same way, and his grandfather died. Like,
yeah.
So like she instilled in him just absolute terror over, normal things, right? So he's he's afraid of fucking everything. Like he is afraid. And so everything that happens to him is just awful. Right.
Right.
Even to the point where, in very Ari Aster style, the opening scene of the movie is him being born, right? Like we actually, like,
Yes.
it's confusing at first. Like you don't really know what's happening. It's black. There's muffled sounds that don't sound right, all this stuff. Then he comes out and then he's not crying, and the mom's super like anxious. Like her anxiety is like through the roof, and it's like it makes you like nervous, and then he's not crying. And one critic was like, yeah, he's so afraid that even in the beginning of the movie, he was afraid to cry. Like,
I think
so
he actually got dropped too. Like I'm pretty sure I
they,
remember that.
yeah, and that's open too. Like, did he get dropped, or is she just so paranoid that she thinks he got dropped, and she's just crazy? Like, yeah, I don't know.
And
That
then even like what was with the whole like wait for me girl, and then like all of a sudden they do their thing and then she's the one who ends up
she's the
dying.
one that dies, right? And so, like, that's the other thing. Like, but that's the worst thing that could happen in that scenario. It's not him dying.
But then here's my question: why? Like, what is with this obsession about anxiety and fear? And that's where I go into a certain identity, just being real, but I'm gonna keep it light there. I'm not gonna go there on camera right now. But like, I feel like it's deeper than just it's the worst thing that can happen. I think it's actually part of the zeitgeist of his context, and that's what the film is looking to explore. And is Ari trying to like put this out there to say, hey, this is ridiculous? Or he's putting it out there to say, like what it again, I'm like a critic. I'm trying to understand what you're trying to say, So for me, I just felt like this was ultimately the ultimate auteur film. Like
For
this is
sure.
really him
For
just
sure.
talking about, because I mean, what I read, it was a very deeply personal film. So a lot of that stuff in there is stuff that he's either experienced or he knows people who've experienced it. And also, yes, I'm gonna ask a question, and your answer is gonna be, well, it's the worst thing that could happen, right? But like, even with the daughter who drinks the paint, like, what was up with that? Like that whole like,
Well, that whole situation was crazy because their son went away to war and died, right?
yeah,
Like he was a war hero. They take in Beau, And instead of putting them in his dead son's empty room, they put him in the daughter's room, kicking her out. So she's got nothing. So, the paint drinking is one of those things where I don't even know if that was actually happening. You know what I mean? Or if his brain is like
I mean,
interpreting something like,
the guy, he's in the bathtub, and the guy is like, and it falls on him. Like, none of the movie happened.
oh yeah, for sure. Like this kid
none of it.
is like entirely a fever dream by a dude that's just like, if the credits had rolled and it was him in a straitjacket in an asylum,
It would have made more sense.
I'd have been like, yeah, that I get it, right? Like it
It
is
wasn't a short movie either.
it's not. It's really long. It's long. But so was Hereditary. Like Hereditary was not short.
No, but I mean but it's a good movie. Like I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Hereditary, like I was actually a little sad when it was over. Like, and same
Oh
thing,
yeah.
they're both brilliant films. So I don't know what.
Yeah, dude, it's a weird movie. And like even the critics are like, they're like, you can watch it a second time, but like don't. They're like, they're like, it's yes, it's open to interpretation, and you can try and dig in, and you can try and really, really dig into it and see if you can figure out what's going on. But generally speaking, the answers are not there in this movie. Like the answers as to what is going on and why they're happening and all that is not in this movie. Like this, for what it's worth, is a movie for you to watch and come away with a feeling and and try and figure it out for yourself. But you're not going to get answers. Like this is what everybody was afraid from Lost, right? Like you're not going to get an ending. You're not going to get the answers you want. You're not going to get anything because that's not what he made. He didn't make a movie about um, a straightforward movie with answers. He made a movie that was weird, right? I mean, he's a weird fucking dude. I mean, Ari Aster, he's got a good chunk of crazy in his brain, right? Like he's out there. Um, and this was it's a bizarre ass movie, and I really do. I think you could watch it again, and you'd probably figure one or two things out that you didn't see before, and you'd probably um, maybe have a better understanding of the film itself. But it's at the same time, it's just like not a movie that is meant to be, quote unquote, understood. It-
I think I do think, again, my hypothesis is those who do get it, like it, or understand it recognize aspects of themselves or their experience in this film. And because I am someone who abhors losing control of yourself, like my whole thing in life is how can I get a hold of my emotions, get a fucking grip, and control the controllables and not be a hapless idiot running around naked, getting hit by cars so people can take me in and take care of me? Are you serious? I'm a grown ass man. I don't need to be taken care of. And if I'm ever in that position, I will commit myself. I will institutionalize myself, but I will not be a hapless idiot, and that movie is what we got. It literally, there's a penis monster in the attic. Like, like to me, it's like, I think
that he stabs the living shit out of.
it's like, I know people who are super neurotic and don't really see a problem with it. It's almost like, oh, it's just who I am, I'm like, no, dude, like fix that. It's a problem. Like this world is not a nice place. Like if you are not taking care of yourself, you will be eaten alive, which Beau eventually he does get his end. So yeah, but again, I'm not going to say like I didn't like it, but I'm owning that statement. I'm not saying it's a bad film. Clearly people liked it, but I just feel like I don't have the context to appreciate.
Yeah. And to be fair, like for everything that I've said, I didn't enjoy this movie. Like I'm with you. I love Midsummer. I love Hereditary. Um, I did not like this movie. I have no intention of watching it again. Like even to try and figure shit out. I'm like,
Nope.
I'm good. But what you just said makes makes the movie make a little more sense for me, in that this movie, the reason that you hate it, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It is about a guy that is not who you would ever be. Like, it's just flat out isn't. And that's, for you, that's the point. Like, you got context out of it, you just didn't realize it, right? Like, you're looking at it and you're like, I would never do any of that shit. And to be fair, most people would never do the shit that he does in the movie. Some people would, like some people are crazy or whatever, but almost nobody is going to experience what this guy actually experiences in this movie. Like, almost nobody in the world. It's too over the top. To be fair, most people aren't going to experience what happened in Midsummer, right? But it is such a psychological break from
Reality.
what you experience in your life, right? Like, everything that, like, literally everything he does, you're like, nope. Like, you specifically, everything that he does,
I mean, even
you're
like
like,
relying on his mother for the credit card, right? Because it's like he goes to the store, his credit card doesn't work, so he's like,
mhm,
"Mom, my credit card doesn't work."
yeah,
Like
because
he clearly he
because
doesn't have a
she raised him like that, though. Like, she raised him to be afraid. She raised him to be her little, whatever.
And that's
And
precisely what I'm getting at, because the thing is, it's like that's so she represents like the ultimate mother from,
yeah,
so
yeah,
like I love how if anyone gets it as they're watching me, they know what I'm saying. But it's like, so it's like that's the thing. I mean, it is even like a matriarchal thing. Like it's
oh, for
like
sure,
if your mom, you only get to be like a certain thing if your mother is. If your dad is and the mother isn't, guess what? You're not in the club, So it's like that's how powerful mom is in that context. But the mom can be so overbearing, even if she's wrong, that she can end up ruining the kid. And I feel like that's why I said Ari Aster may be dealing with his mommy issues, like
oh,
with this film.
he might. I'd be really curious to see what his relationship with his mom is.
Yeah, man.
Like there is definitely, like, if this movie was this personal for him, like, I don't know, maybe now I need an Ari Aster documentary. Like, I need to know who Ari Aster is as a
But
person, to figure out
it's
like
funny
some of
because
this
like
movie.
when we were talking in the pre-show in the last episode, I talked about how, but the thing I remember what I said. The three things that Ari Aster in all three films, though, it talks about deals with anxiety, mental illness, and like one more thing. But like certainly those two things are definitely themes in his films. Uh,
And this movie is like literally those things, like that. They're not just a theme. Like, that's actually this movie, right? Like, this
yeah.
movie it's anxiety the entire time.
Oh, dysfunction, anxiety, mental illness, and dysfunction. And it's the relationship he has with his mother is totally dysfunctional. The hereditary mom, that whole family is dysfunctional. And then of course, Midsummer is like the ultimate in dysfunction, especially between the boyfriend and the girlfriend. And then even like the girlfriend's sister, committing suicide and taking her mother and dad with them. Like that's anxiety, mental illness, and dysfunction.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need that Ari Aster documentary. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah. It would definitely. It may not answer some questions, but at least it'll explain why you have the questions you have.
So,
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so like if the algorithm works, right, and someone sees Beau was afraid and they decide to listen or watch this podcast, if you've seen the movie and you like it, please, and I'm not saying this in vain, I want to know. Like I want to know, like
Yeah.
X-Files, like or whatever it is, whatever they say. Like, tell me what I'm missing, because I'm an open-minded person. I like to learn, I like to grow, and I'm
We've
acknowledging.
convinced you on this show that something was better than you thought it was.
Do you remember? Yeah, what was
I
it?
don't remember.
But yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
it's true. But so yeah, I need to know because Ari Aster, we both proclaimed our love for his other two works. So
Oh yeah. When I saw this movie coming out, I was pumped. Even though I saw the trailer and I
yes,
was like, this one's gonna be fucking weird. Like I knew this one was not gonna be
the other two.
yeah, like I knew it was gonna be different. I knew it was gonna be weird. The other thing that I don't know that helped it is it was billed as a dark comedy. Like it was built more as a comedy than
Yes.
it is, because I do not find it comedic almost at all. Other than it's just like tragically, you know, humorous, I guess. Like again, everything that can go wrong for this guy does. So eh, that's dark comedy in a way, but yeah, comedy isn't my go-to category for this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we talked about it.
we did. I don't know why I did that to us. Why I got us there, uh, but yeah, it is weird, and I definitely like if somebody saw this and liked it. Um, yeah, I'm really curious as to why, and if it's just I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's like, but I love Joaquin Phoenix, and to be fair, he was fucking great. Like he played the
Okay, you know
character
what? Yeah,
spectacularly.
Joaquin Phoenix is he's a national treasure.
Yeah.
He's a chameleon, dude. I mean, he really is. I mean, I think my favorite. Wow, it's so funny. The first time I ever saw Joaquin Phoenix was as Commodus in Gladiator, and he was to me the ultimate. Like, he was Loki before Loki. He was like, as far as in the movies, he was
Mhm.
like Starscream. Like, he was just this like, super jealous, kind of effeminate, just Ponce, but but dangerous one.
Yeah.
Who's willing to cheat and like stab. What was his name? Maximus in the
Maximus.
ribs. So that's that, right? But then my favorite one was actually her. Did you ever see her?
Is no, I always mean to, and I keep forgetting. That's the
Dude,
one with the AI, right? With Scarlett
yes,
Johansson.
dude.
Yeah.
Yes, it is so good. So he's so good in that movie, and he's just this like, he's a regular dude. He's like a sensitive, regular dude, computer program. No, I think he writes cards. He's a copywriter. He writes cards and he falls in love with Scarlett Johansson, who does an amazing job as an AI. And that is nothing like that. And then it's nothing like Beau. Like he had to gain the weight for Beau, right?
Mhm.
And then he's gonna get skinny again for like Joker. Like, dude, you are like Joaquin Phoenix is the shit. Like,
Yeah,
he really
he's
is.
dope.
So I will say, Joaquin, as much as I didn't understand the movie, like you made me feel something. And what you made me feel was utter contempt, but then also like fear for your plight, because I felt like at any point you were in danger. And I was right. I mean,
Yeah.
but like, yeah.
But like to be fair, like you get to the end and the way that he dies, the location he dies in is so fucking bizarre that it doesn't make any sense because it has to be in his mind, right? Because his mom is already dead. But she's
I
the
buy it though. I buy her mom faking her death. I do.
well, she faked her death in the first place, but then he doesn't he kill her? Doesn't he
Right. He
choke her out? So
strangles
like
her and then she like
yeah.
falls and
Yeah,
yeah.
so like she's dead, but her lawyer is there with her. Like there is definitely like where Midsummer puts you, that ends in a note that is for that world real, right? Like
Oh
that
yeah.
ended in a dark, terrifying place, but like that's real. When you accept the supernatural portion of Hereditary, like that thing that happened at the end, that was real. Like those people went through that thing. At the end of this movie, he kind of can't possibly have gone through that. So what is that ending? Like my brain is still like, okay, if that's how he went out, that had to be like inside his mind. Like maybe he died, maybe he lost it and just dies, in real life. But what we see can't be what actually happened to him. Like it
You
just
know what
can't
I
be.
think? I think that here's what this is literally happening in real time on the podcast. I think after he got hit by the car, he was in the hospital, and everything after that was a fever dream, and then he fucking died. And
Dude,
he died because he didn't make it to his mom's like he'd make it to her. And even the fact that she got killed by a chandelier, like, that's just so random, dude. Like, really? Like, that happened? Like,
Yeah.
but that to me, that actually almost helps me make sense. Like, make it make sense, right? Like, he did get hit. Like, he was had a schizo break with reality, runs outside, gets hit, and then he's like in the hospital, fever dream, and then yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to make sense of it, you almost have to look at it like that. But yeah, like if you just said at some point in the movie that he was schizophrenic, everything that he saw would all of a sudden make sense for the character, right? Like the way that he sees the world, that's not necessarily the world, but in his eyes, it's the way he sees it. Maybe it's not somebody falling through a ceiling, maybe like literally a ceiling tile fell down, but his brain snapped and, like all this stuff you could explain away with some sort of psychosis. But they really like, other than him having a therapist and getting some medication, they don't really lean into that. Like nobody ever says, you've got problem X, Y, and Z. He just needs medication and he gets a really cool new drug. Like that's like so yeah, it's weird for sure. It's a weird ass movie. But with regards to her, it is streaming on HBO right now, or sorry,
Oh,
Max. So I may try and see it this week. I mean to like I want to so much, and I've always meant to, and so if I can remember to do it, I'm going to keep this webpage up. So I try to remember. My favorite webpage, if you've forgotten, is justwatch.com. You want to look up a movie, go look it up. I find that's where I find out where almost anything is streaming, and if it's not on there, then I'm like, well, fuck it, I'll wait.
All pop, no culture. Brought to you by
Brought to you by
justwatch.com.
not actually, they're not paying us anything. Where this is not an endorsement of any kind, other than I like the webpage a lot. Yet. Yeah. So so that's that. Yeah, Beau was afraid. Weird. Go watch it. So from weird ass shit, can we transition to something good, which is Shogun?
Wow.
So I saw the trailer for this a while ago and I was instantly in love. It from the trailers, like if you just watch the trailer for Shogun, it is beautiful. Like the cityscapes that they use for 1600s Japan are incredible. The ocean scenes, the seafaring stuff is amazing. The forest, like it's all incredible. And so one of the things that I found to be really interesting before we get into the movie itself is like the main guy is played by Hiroyuki Sanada, who was in Lost. He's been in a bunch of stuff. But what he said when he signed on to do this show, he told the showrunners that
Yes.
they
Japanese.
had to cast Japanese. He would only do it if they cast Japanese. Because he didn't want some like if this is about Japan, you cast Japanese people. Like you do that. And so they did. Like this is the most hardcore Japanese television in America that I have ever seen. They don't bother, at least in the first episode. I told you, you've watched both of the available episodes. I've only watched the first one, so I'm a little behind. But they do not bother making like the Hunt for Red October slow transition from, Japanese to English. It is Japanese. This is subtitles the entire way through,
Yes.
which, you know, can be hard if you're trying to watch this in any sort of casual way. You're screwed. You need to be looking at the screen the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fair, it's worth looking at the screen the whole time. The show is beautiful. And it's fantastic in that regard. But if you're going to go watch the show, be prepared for an epic amount of subtitles. It is the most subtitles I've seen on a TV show that is intended for American audiences in probably my whole life.
Agreed.
You know,
I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I am a fan. I feel like I'm actually a couple of things. Number one, I did start Blue Eye Samurai. I fell off, not because it's a bad show, it's a good show. But this is going to make me go back and watch Blue Eye Samurai and finish it. Number one.
So good. So good.
Number two, Anna Sawai, or maybe Sawai, but I'll say Sawai, who's also in
Monarch.
Yes. Anna, like, I never dissed you in Monarch, but I did basically say I only liked like the adults. I didn't like the kids. So
Yep.
I was
Yep.
saying I didn't like you. But in this show, like yeah, dude. And the thing is,
So,
you've only seen the first episode, man. I'm telling you, the second episode is even better.
yeah.
I'm not. Like you said I could spoil, but I'm not even. I don't know if I even need to because it's just like I'm just gonna talk about the themes. But like, yo, she's killing it. Like this is like. And then the other thing I'll say about the show, really quick, is I shared it on my Facebook, but I actually hadn't seen any trailers or anything. I saw it, looked interesting, and I'm a big fan of Hiroyuki Sanada rather, and I've been seeing him forever. I was a little mad that he got killed in Endgame. I'm pretty sure that was him who fought Ronin, and I'm like, you don't cast this guy just to get gets killed. Like what? He's too important. But anyway, I feel like, and I also remember as a kid, like Shogun, like on NBC,
Yes.
the
Me
main
too.
series. But like but I didn't know anything. Like I didn't know anything. And then number two, I don't want to be spoiled. I know it's already been done. There's a novel, there's a TV show, but I still know nothing, so I'm not gonna look it up. Okay, so whatever. But I remember what I was gonna say now. Everyone was saying this is gonna be like a Game of Thrones level show, and to me, I was like, okay, that's a pretty tall order. Like if you're gonna
Yeah, it
bring
is.
Game of Thrones into it, you better bring it, right? So and I remember like that's what people said about Lord of the Rings and Amazon. And frankly, I know that you and Andy were more fans than I was, but I was not. It wasn't giving it to me, right?
It was for me. It was not Game of Thrones.
Okay, cool.
It just wasn't like that. Was
Right.
not a comparison that I think was fair. And I think I said that when we talked about it. I
You
don't
were
think
right.
that
It was like it's not the same thing. You're right. It wasn't fair. It needs to be on its own. But this one, like, it is giving me Game of Thrones because of the political intrigue, because of the violence, and because I'm a red-blooded heterosexual dude. Like, I was frankly a little surprised that we got little boobies. I'm sorry. Like,
Yes.
I thought I didn't know. Like, I didn't know. FX, I think of that as like not HBO, right? So I'm just kind of like,
Right.
okay, FX,
Right.
not HBO. So how can no boobies? So like there's violence, there's let's say for the third and last time, because I don't think people think I'm like, oh, he's like sex crazed. Anyway, saw that, like, and then like it literally is so much chess. And Lord Toranaga, I think it like
Yeah.
Hiroki, the main character, he's given me like what's his name? Ned Stark vibes, you know, like so like, but the thing is, I hope like this is its own thing because apparently if it is just a limited miniseries, that's sad because like we're gonna fall in love with these characters, then it's gonna be over. But like I like that. I like the fact that both uh Hiroyuki and Nestor Carbonell are both from Lost. That's cool. Like they're both reunited sort of in this show. And then this Cosmo Jarvis guy, he's really good.
Dude, I have no idea who he's like. Tom Hardy light, and he's so good.
So he was so he looked, yes, Tom Hardy. So I looked him up. Apparently, I'm like, I know I've seen you before, and now I know where. He was in Raised by Wolves. That's
Okay.
where he was from, but he was basically the guy who invented like all those androids or whatever. So he's only in like flashback scenes, but no, he's damn good. And again, the second episode to me is better than the first. The first is really
Okay.
exposition.
Yeah, that's true.
The second is where things get going. So, yeah, tell me like what happens in the first, because I mean, I watch them together, so they're kind of blended together now in me.
Yeah. Well, number one, Cosmo Jarvis makes me laugh because number one, that name is ridiculous. I don't know that makes me laugh, but he looks like Aaron Taylor Johnson and Tom
Yes.
Hardy had a baby.
Yes.
But yeah, so number one, this is loosely based on a true story. So there is some fact behind what happened. I don't know how much. I don't know what percentage, but so what we see in the first episode, there's a lot going on. So the I don't know if he was the emperor, but the ruler passed away. So for the time being, everything's being run by the five heads of the five heads of the families. And because Hiroyuki Sanada's character, Lord Toranaga, has done a couple of shady like practices, right? Like he's trying to marry in some larger families into his clan or whatever. The other four families are kind of over it, and so they're effectively telling him that he's out. Right? Is what I get from it in the first one. So you've got that story going on. He's trying to figure out what his next move is. after that, right? Like he isn't just because at one point, even in that first episode, he's like, I'm not, he's like, I don't want all the killing. You know, he's trying to figure out, you know, what the next move is, what he's going to do. And so you've got all that, and he is definitely the political player. Like he is not the guy. His first, you know, just from that line, his first instinct isn't to go in and, you know, swords ablazing, right? Like he wants power, but he wants it in a way that is respectable and sustainable, or at least, um, you know, impressive enough that people will go along with him. And then you've got the side story where this boat full of um, the privateers, basically, like um, I think they said they're following Magellan's map.
Yes.
And the gist of it is that Japan has been trading with Portugal. Portugal is the only country that knows where Japan is. So every trade that they've made with Japan, everything that they've done with Japan up until this point, Portugal has the monopoly on this. To the point where there's Portuguese priests on living in Japan, teaching Catholicism and doing their thing. Um, and so this privateer is trying to get there. You know, there's kind of a cut. Like it doesn't really explain what happened. Like they're on the boat. There's a little bit of not quite mutinous behavior, but like they're not all on the same page as they're heading out and following Magellan's way. It jumps ahead to them almost like a good chunk of the crew is dead. They're starving to death. The ones that are still alive, and then he's there, and they kind of wash up on shore. And so this boat gets discovered by one of the smaller clans, I think, that is a like a subset of Tanaga's clan, right? So they discover this boat, and you know, and it kind of takes off from there. Like this episode, the first episode, the one that I've seen, is really, like you said, setting up a lot. So you're meeting a lot of characters. You know, you're going through, you know, who all these people are, and you get a pretty good idea of what their roles are going to be. Like the guy that discovers the boat, his clan, like he thinks he's a badass, and he tries to act like a badass because he's got all the shit. And then uh, Lord Toranaga's right hand man shows up, and he's like, "Hey, nice boat. That's our shit." And then he's like, and then the dude that was all like, you know, tough and shit is like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we were totally going to give that to you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't, just go ahead and take it all, right?"
Yeah.
And so, you know, that little bit is kind of funny to see that um, in the process of them trying to transfer all these weapons and all this stuff that were on the privateer ship, which is all stuff that is not traditionally Japanese, right? So that's one of the things that I do know is like an overarching story through Japan at the time, is that Japan was tied up in, you know, Japanese warfare. You had the samurai, you had all that, you had armor and swords and all that. They didn't use guns, they didn't use cannons. That wasn't their fighting style. And so to find this ship that is loaded with, you know, Western weapons is potentially a total
Game
tide
changer.
changer, right? Like,
Mhm.
so when they're trying to transfer this stuff from this little village to the Lord's,
Awesome.
yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, that's right. So Osaka, Japan. When they're trying to transfer this stuff over there, they hit some rough waters. And before that, we meet Nestor Carbonell's character, who I fucking love.
Yes.
He is so different than Richard on Lost.
Yes.
Like, so what, like to the point I didn't, number one, I didn't know he was in it. So when I watched the trailer and he popped up in the trailer and went by for like 2 seconds, if he hadn't spoken, I wouldn't have recognized him. But I recognized his voice and I was like, holy shit, that's Richard from Lost. And so, you know, I was super excited to see him and his, um, you know, I don't know if befriends is the right word, but you know, he gets along with at least our British friend played by fake Tom Hardy. Um, and so, you know, along the way going from little town to Osaka, they get hit in this big storm. Well, uh, you know, Walmart Tom Hardy saves the day, saves, you know, basically everybody. and ultimately helps them save even the kind of the lord of that little
Yes.
village. And so, in a way, he's kind of ingratiating himself by doing these things. And I think that's kind of where the episode ends, is right after he saves the guy. So I think that's all I've seen. But like, we've started to see the player. And the other thing that's happening in the background is Lord Toranaga is starting to try and get his. They're not related, but Mariko, played by Anna Sawai, who was beautiful. Like
Gorgeous.
she's young, but she's very beautiful. And so he's trying to get her to move behind the scenes too,
Yes.
like to start making some political marriagey, moves behind the scenes or whatever it is. So that's the first episode. But I think at this point, I know there's going to be more characters. I have to assume at some point we're going to get a little deeper into the other four clans, even though Hiroyuki Sanada is the main character. If it's if we're going for a Game of Thrones comparison, at some point we do have to get to know these other families.
Which is why I'm realizing, I think I said like in the pre-show, I was referring to like how you speak to power. That was in the second episode. So so you're going to see that scene in the second episode. Ishido, who you do meet in the first episode, like he's the lead, like he's kind of like the most powerful one of the other like Toranaga is like the one they all hate on, right? But the other four are being led mostly by this guy named Ishido, and he's like the one who was doing all the talking and like basically like he's a hater, but he's good. The actor's really good. Yeah, no, a lot happens in the second episode as far as getting to the other clans, and then Toranaga meeting fake Tom Hardy, and even fake Tom Hardy meeting Anna Sawai. Like a lot happens, and then like by the end of the episode, you're like, okay, stuff's going down. Like yeah, people can die. Like I'm not saying like yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Like it's Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I do feel like that. I feel like from watching, because I think I said that to you guys in the chat. I was like, this is legit. Like this is Japanese Game of Thrones. Like this is what the Game of Thrones fans are looking for next. Like this is the thing. And so in that regard, I think it's really great. The guy's name, the Cosmo Jarvis, his character's name is John Blackthorne.
Yes.
So I should probably be more respectful and call him Blackthorne from here on out instead of fake Tom Hardy. But yeah, you can just tell. I mean, this is going to be a 10-episode season, so there's going to be a lot going on. It is. They dropped 2 episodes at first, but it's weekly after that, so there's only going to be 1 episode a week. But I think it's just great. Like I said, yes, you have to pay attention. Yes, you have to read a lot of subtitles. There's a lot of reading. Sounds like it doesn't change that much in the second episode, although you do get your little reprieve when I don't know what Richard's name is in this. Do you know what his character's name is?
I just saw it. It's hold on, Vasco Rodriguez.
Oh yeah, Rodriguez. So when Rodriguez shows up, when he is dealing with Blackthorne, you get they speak in English. There's a few Japanese characters that speak English, so they can speak to him. Their English is appropriately broken.
Yeah.
I think there's also a couple of Portuguese priests that are there that kind of fill the gap and help break up the all Japanese speak and get you some English in there. But it's primarily Japanese. So yeah, it is a lot of reading, but it is worth it.
Totally worth it. And actually, for me, I'm so used to reading subtitles. Like at first, I was like having to pay attention, but then it's crazy how I'll actually forget I'm reading it. It's just like I just like it just flows for me. But everyone's different, because some people it is a pain in the ass. So
but I'm the same way. But my problem is I get comfortable and then I look away when they're talking, and then I'm like, shit, I just realized that I don't know what they said.
It's only English. When it's only English, I will be less fixated,
Right.
but if and that does happen, like even in the second episode, like whenever it is, well, it's funny because like even if it's English, it's like if they're speaking Portuguese, they speak English, like
Mhm.
in the show, but it's really Portuguese in a way. But man, one thing I want to say really quick, the Portuguese, man, like I already knew this, but it's one thing to know it on a academic level, but to just really see it, like the original big bads of the European, like whatever, were the Portuguese. Like they were the original big bads. They built all the slave castles in West Africa. Like they were the ones, all like them in Spain, and then it turned into Britain and France. But like it's just crazy how the Portuguese at first, because like even like by the end of the first episode, you're like, man, fuck those Portuguese. like they're the bad guys. And it's like, and I think, and that's why I almost want to go back to Blue Eye, because who were the Europeans in that one?
This Blue Eyed Samurai takes place later.
It's like 1800.
So yeah, I think it was
Okay.
1800s, and I think the
The
bad guy in
British
that, I
then.
think he's Scottish.
Or Scott. Okay,
If I'm
so
not mistaken. I think
got
he's
it.
Scottish.
Okay.
So yeah, we're looking British Isles-ish, Um,
So the Blackthorn won.
yeah, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely I think it's an interesting story just overall, like just
So
from
do you
the
know the story? Because I don't.
no, I just mean like from the 10,000 foot view, like we're
Okay.
gonna see um kind of the westernization
Yes.
of Japan. And to be fair, I think I don't know how if Blue Eye Samurai, some of the story behind what's going on is real, because in Blue Eyed Samurai, they have abolished trade with any Europeans. So around the 1800s, they said that there's no trade with Europeans. That's why this one dude who is trading weapons, he's not supposed to be there. Like what he is doing is against the law, is against Japanese law, but he's supplying weapons and things like that. Um, Whereas in this one, I think what we're seeing is we're seeing how they got to that point where they had to abolish, the trade with the Europeans. So watching those two kind of in context is actually probably kind of interesting. You're kind of seeing the two bookends
Yeah.
of the attempted colonization, because Japan really fought colonization. They didn't want to
Oh,
become
yes.
European and white. Japan is still Japan, even though it's much more.
It's on their terms.
Yeah, exactly. They're not a third world country or anything. They're not a war torn country anymore or anything like that. But they're also definitely distinctly not Western.
Yeah.
So they did what they were supposed to do to keep their civilization
Japanese.
their own. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Incredible.
yeah, I think I'm really excited to watch more and more of this show. I think
And
um,
it's
yeah,
really
I
mixed.
like I said, if your itch is Game of Thrones, this will scratch that itch a little bit.
1000%.
Um, so cool. The only other thing I've got, and it's moderately Japanese still. I've told the story before. When I talk about video games, I talk about how the only reason, one of the biggest reasons that I play video games today is that when I was 19, 20, 18, somewhere in there, somewhere between 18 and 21, 97, so 20. Um, the I worked for Kmart, and the Kmart in Livermore shut down. So I was there up until the last day. And so what happens when you shut down a retail store is they take all of the stuff that's in the store and anything that's high value, they ship off to other stores to sell, right? They don't want to discount things that they can get full price for. Well, employees started to get better and better discounts as the store was shutting down. And I had a really cool manager. Um, and he was like, because I was talking to him one day and I was, talking about video games and how I used to play a lot, hadn't played in a while. And, we were about to ship our original PlayStations out to other stores. And he's like, well, what if one, made it here another month? It would be 25, it'd be down to 25%. And, so would a game, blah, blah, blah. So I got, I think my PlayStation, I got MLB 97, I guess, and Final Fantasy 7 for like $75, which was an insane, like you couldn't buy a used one for that.
Right.
And it was just because I had a cool manager, and he's like, "Look, man, fuck this place." He's like, "They're shutting down." He's like, "I'm gonna be out of a job. I don't care." And so, it was super cool. And so I sat down and I played Final Fantasy 7. And from that point on, I have been playing video games regularly. Like I was almost out of video games. If I hadn't got that deal, I probably wouldn't have ever bought another game system. I would have been a mature adult and gone out and done adult things and probably had friends. But instead, I found video games. And so Final Fantasy 7 was an epic game. It was like 100 hours long. Like it was incredible. It was a great story. The graphics were better than anything out there at the time. You look at them now, they look ridiculous, but at the time they were amazing. Like everything about this game was fantastic. Had twists and turns that were painful in some spots. It had a beautiful ending. Like everything about it was great. And the Final Fantasy series has always been a series that I play religiously. I've played every single one since Final Fantasy 7. The 16th one came out
Wow.
last year, and I played that. There's been a couple of them that got actual sequels. So that the funny thing about the Final Fantasy series is that none of them are direct sequels to the other games. So Final Fantasy 7 and Final Fantasy 8 are not direct sequels. They don't even take place in the same world. They're not the same people. Like each one is its own world and its own set of characters. They started making actual sequels. So there's like a Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 13 2, and I think there's a Final Fantasy 13 3.
Wow.
But generally speaking, each one is its own thing. Well, because Final Fantasy 7 was a game changer for Sony and EA at the time, they've decided that with the current generation of systems actually started on PlayStation 4, they wanted to remake this game. And they wanted to do it with modern graphics and, modernize the story a little bit, but try and keep it, relatively close. And so 2 years ago, I think, Final Fantasy Remake came out, and it was the first, like, third of the original game. And it is big, it's beautiful, all this. So, I finished that one, and they just released Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is the second of a trilogy of the remake of the original Final Fantasy VII. So I'm playing that now. It literally came out this week, and I don't know, 15 hours into it or whatever. This game is gorgeous. It is absolutely beautiful. The acting's phenomenal. If you've played the original, like the character building intention is there. They've made a couple of changes that are really interesting. And it'll be interesting to see how they develop as the game goes on. But this one, I mean, it is just a gorgeous game. It's easy to play. And, one of the things that always caught me with this story is that it had a really great story it wasn't like in your face, like we need to take better care of the world. But the gist of the story is that there was this super corporation called Shinra that it was basically taking the Earth's energy and using it for power. And as they are using that, it's literally like killing the planet. So, you and a group of your ragtag bunch of, not criminals, but mercenaries are out there trying to save the world and stop this company. And then there's a larger villain, and there's a lot of magic and all that stuff involved too. But the character that comes out as one of the big bads, his name is Sephiroth, and he's like the traditional Final Fantasy bad guy. Like if you ever talk about Final Fantasy bad guys, he's the first one you see. He's tall, he's got long white hair, like foot length long white hair, big ass like samurai sword or ninja sword, and just a great villain. But like he's, with these remakes, it gave them the opportunity to use voice acting, right? In the original, you couldn't do voice acting back then. The discs couldn't hold a game and voices. at least on that scale. You could get away with it in a baseball game because they recorded, you know, 500 things they say, and then they just play it here and there in a baseball or a football game, right? It's a lot easier to do. But to do entire scripts with all these characters just wouldn't work. Now it's super feasible. We're getting into the to the to the point where, you know, there's some companies that are talking about recording the dialogue and recording things and putting them up on the internet so that the game itself can be smaller, and then it can pull in the dialogue as you play. So that's a thing that is possible too. But this one is all recorded. The voice acting is fantastic, and you know, we're just in the middle of the story. I just started it, and to be fair, I don't know how far it goes into the story. So it's just been a lot of fun to start playing. And so, um, you know, I don't really have a whole lot to say about it other than it's out. And if you're a Final Fantasy VII fan, you should, number one, you should play Remake, which came out a couple of years ago. And then you should play the Rebirth, which is this one that's out now. What I thought was really cool is that Sony put them out. If you bought them digitally, you could actually buy both games for the same price as the new one. So, you know, if you wanted to get into this one and you hadn't played the first one, you don't have to spend any extra money. They made it very accessible to go out and play. So, if you're a video game nerd, if you like your RPGs, your Japanese role playing games, and if you're a Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy fan in general, this one you should go out and play.
So I think it was really cool that we learned your video game love origin story. I think that's cool. And I know that, you know, like you put clips of movies like in the podcast before. If there's any way to get clips of even the video game, I think that
I'll find some. I'll get some in there. I'll either capture some of my own or find a few to feed in from online. But
and then thirdly, like, you know, I like in the 80s, like I had a Commodore 64, and so basically I did play some video games back then, but the ones I really loved were like super old school RPGs, and the two that I loved the most were one series called The Bard's Tale, and it was like Bard's Tale 1, 2, and 3 on Commodore 64. Oh my God.
I had at least one of those.
What was that? One of them?
I said,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I had at least one of those.
And then the other one was Ultima 4 Quest of the Avatar. And I know there was Ultima 1, 2, and 3. And so when you were talking about like sequels to games, I was wondering, like, I think Ultima 3 and 4 are together. Maybe Ultima 5 even is like a trilogy. But either way, I mean, I remember spending a whole summer indoors playing.
I had one of the Ultima games too.
Huh.
Yeah. Like I've always been a fan of the RPGs because, you know, for me, and the way that I play, even to this day, as a you know, a grumpy old man, for me, I'm not one of those people, because there's a lot of games out there right now that are about how hard they are and how you have to adapt and overcome and get better to get from point A to point B, and you could die 100 times before you get to the next part of it, and I'm all for that. They call those Souls-like games because there's a series of games called Dark Souls that came out that kind of led this charge, and so these games all get the Souls-like banner kind of thrown at them, and those aren't for me. Like, I do not want a game that is going to frustrate the living shit out of me. Like, it's not how I play. I play for story. I like gameplay, but I play most games on easy. Like, when they have difficulty settings, I'm like, dude, I just want to have an experience. Like, and so RPGs have always been a big deal for me because, you know, Final Fantasy VII, it's changed a lot over the years. But the original Final Fantasy VII was turn-based. So, you know, every single thing you did, you would choose, you would wait, you do your turn, then you wait for everybody. Now everything is action RPG. So you're actually actively fighting and tying things in, which is fine. I'm used to that now. I'm still not the biggest fan of it. But for me, games that at least have heavy RPG elements are my favorite games. Anything that I have to really immerse myself into the character, other than something like The Last of Us, which is still such a story-based game and such a a refined, like, you're this character and this is your path. There's no veering from it. You're just like, you're going to experience this thing that is beautiful and well acted and well made. Those are the games for me at this point. I like them a lot more. And so, I Final Fantasy VII I have to go back to, because like I said, it's well, it's almost like my re-origin story, because I did play video games a lot as a kid. I had an Atari when I was really young. I had an Atari, so I had Pole Position, I had Pitfall.
Yep. Sure, you did Mario Brothers or something, right?
Well, and then I got my Nintendo, so I had
Okay.
Super Mario Brothers, I had, all that. And then I had the Super Nintendo. Like I made the transitions for a while, and then like I said, when I was 16-ish or something like that, like I stopped playing games for a good stretch of time.
Yeah.
And if that deal hadn't gone down,
Gamer.
I probably wouldn't have been playing games anymore.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, that's kind of my reorigin. I've told my Nintendo story, my Christmas story for Nintendo, where I
Yes.
thought, yeah. So like that's, I've got video game stories. And so, but yeah, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is out. I highly recommend it if that's your jam. If you're going to buy it, look for the deal that has the first one. If you haven't already played the first one, it's exclusively on the PlayStation 5. And it really is gorgeous. The music is great. That's one thing that has been great in Final Fantasy games forever, is that they use full orchestra, and their soundtracks are pretty impressive. So there's been a lot of like concerts and stuff where you can go and just listen to the Final Fantasy music played in concert.
Nice. I love that.
So, yeah, it's really cool. Like the music is really great. If I can sneak some of that, and I will, that gets us a little closer to in trouble with the copyright people. So I may or may not be able to get that in there, but we'll see. And with that, I don't have anything else. I don't know if you do. We'll dive into Beau is Afraid a little more. I think Lauren's going to try and be back next week. What's the one? The American. He's
American American Story or something. I already
no, yeah. She just saw it with her girls group, so she's going to talk about that. Sounded like she didn't love it as much as I would have expected it to be loved.
That one to me seemed a bit more like my code word is sociological from
maybe
racial standpoint, and I
for
feel
sure.
Like,
for sure.
And I think that's when I think like, anyway, I'm me, I'm big on demographics and audiences, and I think certain things will connect with certain groups, and yeah, I want to, I mean, yeah, I now want to see it just so I can speak to it as well, because that's my jam. Like,
yeah, no one looks. Yeah, I'm really curious what she has to say about that. I think we're talking about trying to have Sarah on at some point to talk about Dune.
I definitely want to see. I got to see Dune probably on Saturday of next week, so that way we can see it. We can talk about it next weekend. So,
yeah, Dune is a fun one, because even if I don't see it, I don't have to worry about spoilers because I've read the book. So I'm not worried about talking about what's happened. So even if I don't see it, like we can just dig in. So cool. We'll have that stuff next week, and probably something. We'll shoehorn something else in there for sure. And at this point, we'll probably talk about Shogun again. I feel like this is.
Oh my god! Yes, it's going to be our new weekly kind of Oh, and the next week, not that it matters, but daylight savings, baby. Woo-hoo.
Is it really already?
Ah, man, next Sunday.
Jesus Christ! Get ready for them long days, man.
I'm down. I like the long days very much. Very much.
Stephen King says, "Long days and pleasant nights." So cool. Well, with that, then I will say to everybody at home, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If I ever friggin' upload these, because I suck. What's your friend's name? Tell him I apologize for not uploading the audio. I will get better
Mike.
at that.
What's up, Mike?
Yeah. So I will get better at uploading the audio. It's not that hard for me. I just am forgetful. So I'll get that up, and I will We'll see you next week.
Peace. By the way, and next week, definitely, I know you won't see it, but dude, Dune, like, that's got to be seen. Like, I'm hearing nothing but amazing
Oh
things.
yeah.
The
That's the
part.
thing. Like, that's why I was laughing, because I was like, I saw it on Rotten Tomatoes at like 95%, and I was like, I need to understand what these 5% are looking at, because, like, I know I haven't seen it, and so I'm not the best, um, evaluator here, but that doesn't make sense to me. Like, it's for this movie, I expect it to be pretty damn close to 100% from the critics, right? Like,
Mhm.
other than the pacing would have been the thing, right? Like, and from what I'm hearing, that's much less of an issue in this one. Um, and so, like, I was looking into it, and some of the comparisons are just stupid.
Oh,
The like, or the complaints that people have are just stupid,
okay.
because they're talking about, like, they're like, well, it's just, blah blah blah, and if you haven't watched the first film, this isn't going to make sense. I'm like, dude, why would you? Who's going to see Dune Part? It's literally called Dune Part 2.
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
you walk in the door and haven't seen Part 1,
You've
that's
already
on
lost.
you. It's not
Mhm.
like it's the MCU. It's not like you're walking in and they're like, here's the Marvels. You have to have seen X, Y, and Z beforehand. And if you haven't seen that, maybe you won't get this, right? Like, no, it's Dune Part 2. If you didn't see Dune Part 1, which you can just watch, I think it's on Netflix and HBO right now. I think it's in two
Okay.
places. So if you haven't seen that, then what are you doing? Like, this isn't for you. Go watch those. And then if the first one wasn't for you, then the second one might not be for you. Like, if you really hate the first one for some reason, there's no reason to watch the second one. There's just that's 3.5 hours of your life or whatever. Like, just, it's okay. You don't have to love it. Now, I think I'm exaggerating. I think it's only 2.5 hours. Um, but
But it feels
but
longer, the first one.
the first one is a slog for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't complain about that. Like, I get that it's slow, and I didn't love that it was slow, but I understand why.
Yeah.
But that comes from having read the source material. I think, if you understand what Dune is, then you're fine. If you don't understand, then yeah, that first movie sucks. And if that first movie sucked for you, you might not be into the second one. But the other thing is, like, people comparing it to the miniseries, or the original film, right? People don't really reference the miniseries because it was like the second take of Dune, and it doesn't quite get the credit as the movie. But you can't really compare it to either of those two, like, either, because the movie is considerably shorter. The original movie is considerably shorter than what these two movies are together. And it's just, I mean, it's an epic. Like, it's like if you watch Lawrence of Arabia and they're like, we're going to try and do this in 90 minutes. You're like, that's not the story. It's an epic, and it's going to have its, it's going to have its problems for sure.